Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom. I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman for the National Public Diplomacy Directorate in the Office of the Prime Minister. This is a special briefing this Tuesday, the 18th of March. It's day 5, Tuesday, the 18th of March. It's day 529 of the October 7th war. This morning, the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister instructed the Israel Defence Forces to take strong action against the Hamas terrorist organisation in the Gaza Strip. Why has Israel taken this action? For two reasons. Firstly, Hamas has rejected two concrete mediation proposals presented by the US presidential envoy, Mr. Steve Witkoff, and other mediators. Israel agreed to these mediation proposals. Hamas has rejected all of the proposals. All of the proposals. Secondly, Israel has knowledge that Hamas was planning to carry out terrorist attacks against Israel. Hamas was using the ceasefire to build up its forces and rearm to re-attack. As a result, with the approval of the government, Israel's armed forces launched precise, preemptive strikes against Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad targets throughout the Gaza Strip. The following targets have been successfully hit: Hamas military commanders, officials in Hamas's leadership, terrorist cells, launch posts, weapons stockpiles, and military infrastructure used by these terror organizations, which were ready and primed to attack our people. I can confirm these strikes are ongoing. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel has learned our lessons from the October the 7th massacre. Israel will never again allow Hamas or any other genocidal terror force to build up its terror forces on our borders. Hamas has repeatedly vowed to repeat the October 7th massacre, and our duty is to stop them. The goal of this operation is to fulfill the war's objectives. Firstly, to release all of our hostages. Secondly, the dismantling of Hamas's military and governmental infrastructure, and the removal of the terrorist threat from Gaza to Israel's security and to its citizens. Israel will, from this point onwards, act against Gaza with increasing military strength. Increasing military strength. Now, when it comes to the US-Israel partnership, the strong alliance between our two nations, between Israel and the US, is stronger than ever. As such, I can confirm that the return to intense fighting in Gaza has been fully coordinated with Washington. Israel has thanked President Trump and his administration for their unyielding support for Israel, for their commitment to freeing hostages, and to the fortification of Israel's security, while simultaneously striving for peace and stability in the Middle East. So that's the end of our briefing here today. Please put your questions in the chat together with your name and your news outlet, and we will take some of your questions. First question I can see here is from Dan Berger from the Epoch Times. What are the government's demands or conditions to Hamas for resuming the ceasefire? Thank you, Dan. I think I answered that pretty comprehensively in the briefing I've just given. I told you that Hamas had rejected the Witkoff proposals. In fact, they had rejected all of the proposals. As such, Israel has returned to fighting Hamas. Next, a question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Does the renewal of war mean that Israel has given up on seeing more hostages released? Not at all, Joel, is the answer to that question. Not at all. Our war aims remain precisely the same. They are to get every single one of our hostages home. 59 of them remain. We believe that less than half of them are alive, but all of them, the live and those who have been already murdered by Hamas, should be returned home immediately. The destruction of Hamas's military and their governing capability, and ensuring that Hamas can no longer and Gaza can no longer form a threat to this country. Our war aims are precisely the same. Hamas have stopped releasing hostages. As such, we have the right to return to war, to put pressure on them to release our hostages. Next question here is from George Dastis from FA, the Spanish news outlet. Are there any plans to resume ground operations after the strikes? And second, do you have an estimate how much longer the strikes will go on for? Is Israel still at the negotiating table? Thank you. Thank you, George. I think I've answered all of those questions in the comments I've made. Please go down. Next question here is from Maxime Dovra from Jewish Views, Enlace Judio. Does Israel know where the hostages are if they are alive? I think I've answered that question as well. Next question is from another one from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Is Israel concerned about global condemnation of the renewed war and the cutoff to humanitarian aid? Thank you for that question, Joel. Look, Hamas could have chosen to release all of the hostages, but they instead chose refusal, and they want terror and they want war. Now, look, for Israelis, security is not a given; it must be ensured. Hamas must never be able to start another war. We have, since day one, said very, very clearly that we are at war with Hamas, not with the people of Gaza. Now, when it comes to aid, let me share with you that since the beginning of this war, 1,800,000 tons of aid have gone into Gaza. 1,800,000 tons of aid have gone into Gaza. Now, that is more than enough to feed all of the people in Gaza. During the 42-day ceasefire negotiations, our hostage release discussions, 25,000 trucks went in. Again, more than enough food and aid and supplies to supply the people of Gaza. In fact, enough aid and food to fill 80 sports stadiums to the brim, not just on the grass, to the brim. This is what Hamas are doing. They steal the aid, they resell the aid, they use the money to rearm, and then they aim to attack. Again, they steal the aid, they resell it at vastly increased prices, and then they're attempting to rearm, and then they want to attack. During this 42-day period, this of phase one, 25,000 aid trucks entered Gaza. There is no shortage of food in Gaza whatsoever. The only humanitarian suffering in Gaza is that of Israeli hostages who are being chained, they're being starved, and they're being held in Hamas tunnels. Hamas takes the aid that enters Gaza and is exploiting it in order to rebuild its war machine. The aid trucks have become an economic engine for Hamas. Half of Hamas's budget in Gaza comes from these trucks. Now, it was actually the former president, President Biden, that clearly stated on October the 18th, 2023, he said, these are his words, if Hamas diverts or steals the aid, it will stop. So aid that goes to Hamas is not humanitarian, and enabling the enemy to resupply itself so it can regroup and re-attack us, as our intel has very clearly shown, that is not humanitarian. It is suicidal, and we will not allow it. Okay, next question here I can see is from Francesca Kicardi from another Spanish outlet, El Diario. You're saying that among the targets are residential buildings, tents of displaced people and others. Civilians have been killed apart from terrorists. Can you comment on that? Thank you for that question, Francesca. Yes, of course, that is the Hamas propaganda, which you have very diligently repeated, Francesca. Let me tell you our point of view when it comes to this policy. Hamas continues to use the civilian population in Gaza as human shields for its terrorist activities. They continue to use their own people as human shields, which is an international war crime. And Hamas continues to openly incite terrorism against Israelis, which is why Hamas must never be able to start another war. As we've said since day one, we are at war with Hamas and not with the people of Gaza. This morning, very precise instructions were given in Arabic to Gazans to evacuate the areas we were attacking. Gazans would do well to protect themselves and their families, to move away from those areas where we know there are terrorists, to move to areas which the IDF has precisely guided them to. A question from Jodie Cohen at Newsmax. Your Hamas officials reportedly suggested that Israel's strikes have led to a death of the hostages. What's your response to this? Thank you, Jodie. Again, another example, I think, of Hamas propaganda. We've become used to their propaganda by now. They are, of course, a genocidal terrorist organization, so everything they say should be seen within the remit of the fact that they are a genocidal, jihadi terrorist organization, which I know Judy and the viewers at Newsmax certainly understand. Another question here from the BBC, Amir Nader. What's your response to the Hostage and Missing Families Forum that the government has given up on hostages and is pulling out of a deal that would have brought everyone home, military pressure? Okay, thank you for that question, Amir. Just a reminder, Amir, and the BBC, it is Hamas that took these hostages. It is Hamas that continues to hold these hostages. It is Hamas that could set them free, and it is Hamas that is not setting them free. It is Hamas that has murdered our hostages. It is Hamas that has tortured our hostages. It is Hamas that has starved our hostages. Now, simply falling into your line of reasoning, I think, does the work of Hamas, which, to be fair to the BBC, they have been engaged in already very, very recently, paying the families of senior Hamas officials for what is essentially Hamas propaganda, and then passing it off as a real account of what's happening in Gaza, which BBC have had to apologise for. Now, when you repeat the Hamas propaganda, when you give news using Hamas figures, which are, of course, Hamas figures, Hamas cannot be trusted. They are a genocidal terrorist organization. Okay, that looks like the last question. Yeah, I think there was another question we had from James Marlowe regarding the attacks, some action in Syria and action between Syria and Lebanon. Okay, James, thank you for that question. Look, I can share with you that just now the IDF released details of our own Air Force, which had attacked artillery in Khan Arnaba, the area in southern Syria, that posed a threat to Israel. We've made clear that the presence of weapons in southern Syria constitutes a threat to this country, and the IDF and this country, mandated by the people and the government, will not allow a military threat to exist in southern Syria, and we will act against it. Israel will not tolerate the presence of military equipment in southern Syria because we know that it will threaten our citizens, and that is why we are taking steps against it. So any attempt by the regime in Syria and their forces and other terrorist organizations to establish themselves in the region will be thwarted. Just very, very recently, in the last few days, the IDF has attacked other military targets in southern Syria, and among them command and control centers and sites containing munitions and equipment that belonged to the previous regime, which have been attempted to be put back into operation, which means that Israel will not allow terrorist organizations to re-establish themselves in Syria and turn its territory into a front base for Iran. Last week I told you about that the Air Force attacked other command and control posts of Islamic Jihad organization in Damascus, from which the organization has planned and managed terrorist operations against Israel. We are well aware what the Syrian regime is. We know where they come from. We know that their providence is ISIS and Daesh, and that is why, and Al-Qaeda as well, they've never condemned the October 7th massacre. Indeed, they've welcomed the October 7th massacre, which is, of course, because they are also jihadi terrorist organizations. Okay, that's the last question. So with that, thank you for joining us. We are available for interview and for any other questions. So in the meantime, please do stay safe, and we'll see you at the next briefing. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Djobnik signing off.